Chelsea Scalise, and I am with the FAO. And we just want to welcome you and thank you for joining us for our second to last webinar as part of the IGAD Coffee Break webinar series. And today our webinar will feature Sarah Louise Reuter, Dr. Hannah Whitman, and Kevin Cusin from the University of British Columbia. So I'm going to just go ahead and pass it over to them.
Great, thank you very much, Chelsea. We're thrilled to be here included in your coffee break session. We'll start with a quick presentation overview of the conversation that we hope to have today, and then open the floor up for questions and discussion. So I will just share my screen. Excellent. So today I'm presenting on behalf of my two colleagues, Professor Hannah Whitman and Kevin Cusin. I'm a PhD student at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, Canada, and joining today on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam Nation, the Tsleil-Waututh Nation, and the Squamish peoples. So our overview, the theme of the presentation is growing digital agriculture from the grassroots, designing just and sustainable agriculture data applications. So we're joining the call today with a shared interest in agricultural data, but just to set the scene for our conversation, we're looking at governance and power relations around increasing digitalization and datafication of agriculture. So taking a very generalized view, there's a feeling of polarity across one narrative that pits digital agriculture and big data as key tools and solutions for a more sustainable future of agriculture, and also increasing economic growth and the operations of farmers through efficiency. And on the other hand, we have a much more critical view than the proponents, of course, that focuses on how these technologies are perhaps embedded in industrial and extractive practices of agriculture and reinforce existing trends of corporate concentration. And in this view, digital agriculture and big datafication become antithetical to the kinds of futures that these folks envision. However, research in our group and elsewhere is curious about how digital technologies and big data can both enhance food sovereignty and data sovereignty or data justice and disrupt unsustainable food systems, though it requires intentional governance and the design of alternative technologic and economic models. So just to go, before going any further, we'll establish some foundational concepts. So in our claim, we used the concept of food sovereignty, which of course is the right of peoples to healthy and culturally appropriate food produced through ecologically sound and sustainable methods. And the key point for our conversation today, the right to define their own food and agriculture systems. So when digital technologies and the increasing use of data become prevalent in a diversity of farming systems across the world, how can we ensure that farmers remain the rights to define their own food and agricultural systems through data and the tools that they have available? In terms of data sovereignty, the earliest and most explicitly sovereignty-oriented concepts of data and data justice come from Indigenous peoples. The first being the OCAP principles, the principles of ownership, control, access, and possession, which were initially drafted in 1998 and then reframed in 2014, more recently. And then a similar but separate acronym and framework is, of course, the CARE principles, which build upon the FAIR principles of collective benefit, authority to control, responsibility, and ethics. And in both of these frameworks, data sovereignty for Indigenous peoples is a vital part of self-determination and sovereignty of Indigenous nations more broadly. But if we look at farmers and the tools that we have available to us conceptually for sovereignty and justice, the focus is much more on justice in applying existing theories and dimensions of justice, such as procedural, instrumental, rights-based, and so on, to understand the application or implications for data. And there isn't really much that we have thus far to look at what this looks like practically. And that's where we come in. So we see academics, but then also the private sector and startups noticing how valuable data can be and presenting their own uses of how these data can be used. And we're curious about how data sovereignty and data justice could be embedded in the design of the very tools that are being used and proposed. So all three of us are involved in Lightfarm in different ways, and you'll have an opportunity to see our different perspectives when we open for questions. But we're coming to the coffee series with an intention in creating cross-fertilizing research ideas and thinking deeply about the concepts that I've just introduced. And we think that Lightfarm is a unique case study to think through some of these challenges and think practically and pragmatically about how digital technologies can support transitions to more just and sustainable food futures. So Lightfarm is an application that is designed or was designed in partnership with researchers, farmers, and developers. And from the outset was hoping to address the challenges that diversified and sustainable farmers were facing in North and South America. It's an open access, open source, and currently, I will emphasize currently because it comes up in our conversation further, but currently free web-based application for farmers. And yeah, I'll leave it at that and we can address more questions, but just to see what it looks like for farmers, you can start, it is first and foremost a tool for farmers and there are various ways that it can be used, but you would start by mapping out different parts of the field and then they would have an opportunity to take data on agronomic and agroecological metrics such as soil organic matter, but then also social and ecological focused data such as labor happiness and labor justice, and then biodiversity. The goals of Lightfarm are to make the application as accessible as possible, make it farmer friendly and oriented towards farmer needs with the hope of having 10,000 diversified farmers using the application by 2023, to advance data-driven agroecological transitions, so how to use the datafication and digital innovations to support agroecological food system, so focusing on social justice and ecological practices, and then academically to gain insights on the challenges and opportunities for diversified farming. So again, focusing on the affordances of this agricultural data. So currently, Lightfarm is being used by 1,300 users across 70 countries, which is quite exciting, demonstrated on the map there behind me. And then in terms of orienting principles, we showed you very quickly what the application can look like for farmers, but there is really a diversity of indicators that is intentionally focusing on sustainability and these principles of justice and sovereignty. And then, yes, of course, so we're having priorities of both accessibility and feasibility for farmers, and the focus also being on the application remaining free and open source for farmers and users. Okay, so now we come to two main puzzles that we'd like to propose for conversation in our session today. And they're questions that we're currently grappling with in both the application side of Lightfarm and then the research side. So the first being ideas of sovereignty and justice. So in the age of big data and the fourth agricultural revolution, what governance models could support food sovereignty and data sovereignty or justice? And then from the other side, the application is currently free and that was intended from the design, but what funding models could secure longevity of nonprofit innovations like Lightfarm without charging farmers for access or monetizing farmer data without their informed consent? So thank you again for your attention. And yeah, we're hoping to dig into some of these challenges with you. So at this point, I'll open it up for our discussion.
Okay, I think that I should take it over from here since Chelsea might leave soon. I would like also to invite Deborah Drucker, who is the other co-chair of IGAD, to turn on the camera and to also encourage participation from the audience. Thank you so much, Sarah. This Light Forum is a very interesting project. And I would welcome any comment from the audience, which actually is getting quite busy. We were very punctual today. We started really at 1 o'clock. So if any of you would like to get a kind of a very brief comment, probably Sarah could wrap up a little bit if you think that is necessary for those that are joining now. We have about quite a lot of time to discuss. And I see that there is already a person. Please, could you mention your name and your affiliation before the question? Thank you.
Can I start?
Yes, thank you. Yeah. Okay.
Here and to gain knowledge from them. My proposal to Ms. Sarah Lewis is to get the Light Farmer translated into another languages. I mean, likewise, the Arabic language, or other languages, just to make farmers from around the world get benefited out of it. This is my proposal, and I'm ready to help in this direction, in fact. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And yes, we were punctual and we prioritize having a shorter presentation to open for conversation, but we're happy to address any follow-up questions about the application. And perhaps I'll pass this one to Professor Hannah Whitman to talk about the efforts for accessibility of the application.
Sure, thank you so much. Absolutely. Currently, the app is available in Spanish, Portuguese, and by the end of the month, it will be available in French. And those languages were targeted because the partners that we're currently working with are funding the translation of the app into those languages. So it's an open access and open source project. So we super welcome any contributors who are able to translate the app, and we have a process for doing that. One of the things that we've noticed is that most of the agricultural software that's available in the world is very limited in its accessibility to other languages beyond English. So working from the ground up with farmer advocacy organizations that have come to us and said, we want to use this, and then working with them to get it translated, not just into the speaking language of their choice, but also their local context. So we've spent quite a lot of time working with small scale and diversified farmers and thinking about what kinds of data that they're interested in documenting about their own farms and their own situations. And so one of the things that we came to right away is that many of the existing software are interested only in primary commodity crops and yields of those crops. And the farmers that we're working with are interested in documenting other social and ecosystem services coming out of their farms. So for example, crops used for subsistence, crops used for trading and sharing amongst the community, crops used for traditional and medicinal sources. And so farmers have the ability in the app to not only document their harvest, but to document what their harvest is being used for. And so from a research perspective, this is very interesting to me, to really reframe the way we think about productivity on diversified farms, but also the language that farmers are using to describe that productivity. So we've done a lot of work with the farmers in Latin America on this point specifically, and this is something that I think as the app is picked up by more and more users globally, we have a mechanism for people to suggest different categories that they'd like to see in the app, or creating their own languages to describe their farming business. So Kevin has just put in the chat the guide to submitting a translation of the app in your local language. And so we super welcome partners in doing that.
Thank you, Hannah. If you want to contribute to the two questions that I think that you have okay, I see that Andres Ferreira wrote something on the chat, but Andres, you could turn on your mic and if you like.
It's a great question that Andres has posed. So he says, what features does Lightfarm have to help farmers run their business better? Collecting sustainability data is great, but growers are unlikely to use a tool unless it helps them save time or money. And this is absolutely true in our experience. Coming from a research perspective, farmers aren't generally interested in sharing their data with researchers. I mean, we do field-based research and we do community-based research. And when we identify a research question with a farmer advocacy organization, we can work together to collect specific data on this question. The Lightfarm project, which was posed by one of our former postdocs, kind of turns this on its head, and it says, okay, what are the needs that farmers have to run their business more sustainability, and what can kind of a digital agricultural solution contribute to that? And in our early interviews, we found two main documentation needs that farmers expressed to us that were not being filled in the commercial ag software sector. One was calculating cost of production on a crop by crop basis for diversified farms. So there's a lot of really great kind of precision agriculture software out there that's highly specialized and requires a lot of equipment and sort of thinking about, my own family has a large commodity farm in the States, and my sister can calculate cost of production on a very very fine grained basis for her major commodity crops, but the small scale and diversified farmers that I'm working with in Latin America can't do that. They're growing 50 to 100 different crops, often intercropped, and the existing kind of management softwares available to them weren't able to cope with that level of diversity. And so right now we have a lot of farmers who are using it to look at crop by crop yields. We have farmers who are participating in variety trial projects, and they're able to kind of navigate that crop by crop and variety by variety cost of production in an easier way. So that's the first one. That is principally, we're finding that from farmers in North America who are more used to doing kind of cost of production analysis, but we're doing it in a more inefficient way previously. The other piece that we're finding a lot of uptake globally is farmers who are wanting to get an organic or agroecological certification. So organic farmers need to keep records in order to get their certification, and participatory guarantee systems, which are a more peer-to-peer certification process, also requires certification record keeping. And so we've worked with a whole bunch of farmer participatory agroecological certification organizations in Latin America, and also the organic sector here in Canada, to identify what are the documentation and record keeping needs for those farmers who want to get a certification, and we've managed to get most of those needs into the app. So farmers can have one set of records that both helps them monitor their cost of production and gives them the ability to communicate and share their data with certifiers. And they found that to be a help in terms of the efficiency of their farm and overcoming some of the transition costs of organic certification, which we have found to be a barrier for many farmers.
Can I ask one question? This is Ali from Pakistan. I work at Arid Agriculture University, Rawalpindi, Pakistan. So my question is about agriculture and rural advisory services, because those are the main link between farmers and researchers, or if you have developed any technology, you can disseminate among the farming community. So have you developed any strategy to transfer or disseminate this kind of software among the farming community at different levels?
Absolutely. This is a project that came from the farming communities that we work with. You know, and Sarah Louise and Kevin can speak to their experience, but you know, I came from the social sciences where I've spent many, many years on the ground with farming communities, doing interviews, filling out questionnaires, participating in kind of research design sessions with farmers. And I never thought that I would be coming to an app or coming to the software sector. And so the need for this kind of documentation to be able to assess diversified farming systems in a way that was accessible to farmers was an ask that came to us from the farming community. So the way that we're working now is that this is a application that's open access and open source, and any farming community that's interested in it can come and they can use the code, they can use the app, they can sort of propose additional or different kinds of ways of adding functionality. And so some of the changes that we're making as the app goes along, those are all based on what farmer groups are telling us that they want or need. So maybe Kevin, you could talk a little bit about the process of each new release and how it's decided what new functionalities are added and what role different farmer groups have in that. And maybe you could cite a couple of projects like the irrigation project or the certification project as kind of examples where farmer groups proposed ways that an app like this could help them run their business better, and then how we've used that to kind of keep it going.
Sure, I would say that there's kind of two primary pathways that ideas get filtered into the project from farmers. The first is we're working in I think about 10 different countries with partners on the ground that are either providing extension services or that have a connection through a local university, where they're working directly with the farmers, and the farmers will speak to individuals and say, these are my needs, or this is what's working and this is not. So that's one pathway, and that's primarily taking place in North and South America. The other pathway is there are many ways that individuals can suggest ideas directly to the team. One is inside of the app, you can make a feature request just by going to help and saying, this is what I need. And we will get, I don't know, maybe 5 to 10 of those suggestions in a given month. Second, we also have a roadmap that is published and where an individual can go and they can take a look at what we're building right now and either upvote it or downvote it, say, you know, this is something I need, or this is something I don't need. And then based on that, we'll kind of reprioritize what we're building for and what we're trying to seek funding for. And then on top of that, individuals can also suggest new ideas, right? So if they don't see that we're building what they need for their particular context, they can go to the roadmap and actually suggest an idea or send an email directly to community@lightfarm.org. And again, I would say that we probably get 5 to 10 suggestions, primarily through email from those individuals that will then incorporate into the roadmap. If it's a small thing, you know, we might get to it with the next release, and we typically do quarterly releases. And if it's a larger feature, it may take us, you know, finding a funder, finding partners to implement it in order to deliver that functionality. So I guess we could talk a little bit about some of the proposals that we currently have that we're looking to build in the near future. One is a smart sensor project where we actually take in-field soil moisture sensors in order to collect the soil moisture, combine that with crop data and weather data, and then create an irrigation, sorry, I'm blanking on the word, an irrigation prescription for a whole farm or a particular fields. And that's kind of come from the ground up because there's a lot of interest in smart irrigation. We have other ideas around the uses of harvest. That was one of the earliest features that we kind of heard from farmers. Most applications that have to do with agriculture tend to look at yield as kind of the most important outcome. Many of our users said, that's important, we sell a certain amount of what we produce, but we also consume a lot of it ourselves. We feed a lot of it to our animals. We keep it in our community and we'll exchange for other crops. And sometimes we'll gift or use it in certain types of communal ceremonies. Right, so that was a feature that came from the ground up that we implemented in the Light Farm, is just documenting how harvests are used so that more agroecological farms can be compared to traditional farms in terms of yield. So I think that's a few suggestions. Does that help answer the original question?
Yes, it's good. It's wonderful.
There is another person who raised a hand. Please unmute yourself and make the question.
Yeah. I must start first by commending the team. What you have done, it's far-reaching, no gate-saying. And I think the tempo is kept. I think it's going to be a very serious solution to the myriads of problems that we have around agricultural production, particularly with reference to that peculiar group called smallholders. Because it has been discovered, for example, I'm talking to you from Nigeria, over 80% of the total production agriculturally belongs to that group. And they're quite peculiar because they have a whole lot of challenges that they deal with in their own day-to-day activity. And I think I'm talking about this wonderful job your team is doing. One very critical component that I wanted to look into is the fact that in this part of the world, especially for the sub-Saharan Africa, we operate what we call political economy. And to a large extent, that's very little you can achieve if there's no government buy-in. And when I mean government buy-in, I actually mean a very overriding, influence of the government and government agencies on everything that happened around the economy. And like I did say, there are challenges these farmers face day to day. One of the most serious of it all is their own capacity. A lot of these farmers we talk about can neither read nor write. And these farm holdings are less than an hectare. They are scattered, non-contiguous farm plots, and they are not organized themselves. And because they are not educated, and oftentimes in areas where there are critical infrastructural deficits, they tend to subscribe to ideas that come only from authorities around them. And these authorities range from village heads, you have religious leaders, and in some instances, the not too readily available extension agents. And so I'm saying that even when they have information they will share, benefit they can derive from innovations of this nation, until it is sanctioned, until you engage politically, until you engage these legitimizers, the people who have control over them, you don't tend to be able to have a reach to them. And whatever you're doing will really not make significant impact overall. Because for example, we're talking of irrigation data. It will surprise you to know that all the water users, they don't even have defined association. All the dams and the water resources belong to the federal government. And this trickles down. And until you have a sanction or you have a buy-in of these authorities who give them those resources to productive resources, let me put it that way, they wouldn't talk to you. They wouldn't want to release any data, even if they can understand what data you're talking about. So I would want to suggest now that with this wonderful innovation, it will avail much more if there is a divination of strategies, engagement strategy in climes like ours, where we run political economy and everything revolves around government authorities. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. I'll just add one thing to that comment. Thank you so much. One of the other reasons, kind of in the genesis of this app, and this is interesting, coming back to the FAO as the host for this meeting, is that we found that a lot of farmers felt that their experience wasn't being necessarily documented or recognized in the existing kind of agricultural census and different ways that government entities were collecting data about farming systems. And so we know that like the ag census happens every 10 years. There's different ways that different governments collect data about farming systems, and then they use that data to make policy priorities. And some of the small scale and diversified farmers kind of felt that they would like a way to express and communicate their own systems on their own terms. And so we've actually worked quite closely with the FAO team on the tool for agroecology performance assessment, TAPE, tool for agroecology performance evaluation, TAPE. And we've also kind of looked at the data that's required to populate analyses on SDG2, on the AgReS database of the FAO, and on different kinds of census category research. And so what we have found is that farmers can populate most of those data requirements for these different kinds of agricultural surveys in the app itself. And so that is something that we're interested in doing more, is working with farmer groups to export their data in ways that correspond directly to government reporting, such that A, it makes it easier for them to do that reporting, but B, such that the database, we're talking about the production of global agricultural data, that is more reflective of those diverse experiences of small scale farmers globally. So Kevin, do you want to go through some of the responses to Andres's question so that people can kind of see those?
Sure.
And
So
I'm sorry,
okay.
by the way, I'm sorry I'm typing. I just don't want to hog the bandwidth with technical questions.
They're great questions, especially the one on scouting, which I'd like to talk more about, and especially the one on market integrations.
Right. So I can just go through the open source license is GPL v3. There is a public API for other tools in the open source community that are interested in connecting. And that's actually a big part of kind of the design paradigm. Lightfarm is not supposed to do everything. There are tools out there for greenhouse gas emissions. There are tools out there for market integration. We don't want to be everything to everyone. We want to instead kind of build a very easy to use functional app that farmers get utility from, and then integrate with various tools that are going to be kind of the best of breed in each of these different areas. So I think of Lightfarm as the on-ramp. It's easy to approach, it's easy to use, and then depending on your needs as a producer, we can then pull in different modules from other tools out there. The third question was around scouting. We have a very, very basic idea of scouting in the current version of the app. It's not very fleshed out, and certainly we'd be looking with, to work with folks that have more interest in that to build that out in the future. The underlying tech stack is Perl, so Postgres, Express, React, Redux, and Node. And don't worry if that doesn't mean anything to you. That's just the programming languages and frameworks that the app is built on. And it's currently hosted on DigitalOcean, though we're fairly agnostic to where it's hosted. For whether or not the tool helps smallholders optimize their sales and marketing to a limited scope. So we do give the whole farm revenue, expenses, and profitability, and crop by crop profitability. We do not make any suggestions around perhaps you should sell through this channel. We can help you to get the word out. Though we do have a partnership with the Open Food Network, which has chapters all over the world. And we're trying to put together a proposal that can be funded to connect the two apps so the farmers do have better access to that. And then the last question is, what are the system requirements on the mobile side? It is a browser-based app. So as long as a device can access the Chrome browser, you can use Lightfarm.
I'll make two additions to those points. The last point in particular is a challenge. I mean, we have done research that shows that like 40% of small scale farmers globally don't have broadband access. And so they are actually not able to use this tool. And so we are exploring ways to make parts of Lightfarm run offline. This is a significant and expensive technical challenge for a small university-based research group. So we are inviting partnerships to think about donating engineering time to making that happen, because that's something that we've heard loud and clear from our farming partners, especially the ones in Latin America, and frankly, farmers in Canada who don't have broadband access, in some of their remote fields. So that's a very well-known and existing challenge that we've been actively researching, and it's a question of resources to make the app function offline. Back on the scouting piece, I'm particularly interested in this one because over the years, so many farmers, small scale farmers, have asked me for tools to do for scouting pests and diseases and for diagnosing. And so we do have an integration with iNaturalist, which allows farmers to document observations of biodiversity on their farm, so they can document observations of pests that way and of different kinds of insects and plants, and that is a way for them to at least register what is happening on their farm. Right now, what a farmer has to do is go to iNaturalist, make the observations, and then Lightfarm pulls that data in from the GBIF database once it's been validated. So, on our back burner is a package of work that could allow farmers to make those observations directly in Lightfarm, kind of skipping that workaround. Again, that's something that A, requires internet access, and B, is another piece of engineering work. So actively looking for a partnership on that one as well.
Thank you, Hannah. Our time is over. Unfortunately, these coffee breaks are for 30 minutes only. Probably in the future, we are going to consider to extend a little bit more the time, because definitely today we have a presentation that deserves to have more time for some questions. So unless there is somebody that would like to mention something before we close this webinar, just to tell you that this has been recorded and is going to be available from the RDA IGAD dedicated YouTube channel in RDA. So we will send, Chelsea is going to send the email informing about the link afterwards. So thank you so much, Hannah, Sarah, and Kevin, for your time. It has been a pleasure to have you here today. And just to remind to the audience that next week is the last one. And definitely, if you would like to share your experiences with the Interest Group on Agricultural Data here in RDA, members, please just write an email to me, Deborah, or Cindy, and we would consider to extend these webinars that have been very successful. And we hope that everybody had a nice time so far, despite that it's going to end next week. So thank you again to everybody. Deborah, Is all okay? So we can close? Yes?
Yeah, it was great. Thank you very much.
So thank you to everybody. See you
And
very soon.
And thank you for having us. It's been a great conversation. And